He was rushing to catch his first-class flight when a familiar voice called his name. 3 identical boys with his exact green eyes ran past him shouting, "Mommy, hurry up!" as his ex-girlfriend stood frozen, clutching their passports. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel, and let's get started. Snow fell silently over Manhattan, coating the Upper East Side in a pristine white blanket that masked the city's usual grime. Jasmine Williams stood at the window of the luxury apartment, her reflection a ghostly overlay against the darkening winter sky. Her fingers trembled as they clutched the plastic stick she'd been staring at for the past 20 minutes. 2 pink lines. Unmistakable. 22 years of life hadn't prepared her for this moment. The daughter of Bronx school teachers who'd scraped and sacrificed to give her opportunities they never had, Jasmine had always known she'd need to work twice as hard for half the recognition. Her NYU Business Administration scholarship hadn't come easily, nor had her coveted internship at Thompson Real Estate, one of the East Coast's largest development firms. And neither had Michael Thompson's attention. She closed her eyes, remembering their first encounter 8 months ago in the corporate cafeteria. She'd been reviewing quarterly reports during her lunch break when he approached, tall, confident, with piercing green eyes that seemed to look through her rather than at her. "Those projections are wrong," he'd said, sliding into the seat across from her without invitation. "Our Brooklyn properties are undervalued by at least 20%. She'd straightened her posture, determined not to be intimidated. "I noticed that discrepancy, too. I was planning to mention it in tomorrow's meeting." A smile had spread across his face, not the practiced corporate smile he used with clients, but something genuine that reached his eyes. "Well, aren't you full of surprises?" 8 months of secret dinners, weekend getaways, and nights in this apartment had followed. 8 months of believing she might be the exception to the unspoken rules of New York's social hierarchy. The sound of keys in the door pulled Jasmine from her memories. She quickly wiped away a stray tear and turned to face the apartment's entrance. Michael Thompson walked in, his 6'2" frame imposing in a tailored Italian suit that probably cost more than her entire wardrobe. At 28, he represented the 5th generation of the Thompson family, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants who'd built a real estate empire from Manhattan's bedrock. He loosened his silk tie with practiced ease, his mind visibly still occupied with board meetings and property acquisitions. "You wouldn't believe the day I've had," he said, not yet looking at her as he set his briefcase on the marble-topped console table. "My father wants to push forward with the Queens development, but the numbers don't support it yet. I told him—" He stopped mid-sentence when he finally noticed her expression. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice shifting from annoyed to concerned in the practiced way of someone accustomed to managing others' emotions. Jasmine took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed seemed to stretch into eternity. She could hear the tick of the expensive wall clock, the distant honk of taxis on Park Avenue, the pounding of her own heart. Michael's face remained perfectly still, a skill honed through years of high-stakes negotiations. He crossed the room slowly and took the pregnancy test from her hand. He examined it for several seconds, turning it over as if looking for some manufacturing defect that might invalidate the result. Then, with a quick flick of his wrist, he tossed it onto the marble coffee table like a contaminated object. "This is your problem," he said finally, his voice clinically detached. Jasmine felt her chest constrict. "What? Did you really think I would ruin my future for you? A girl from the Bronx?" His voice wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was matter of fact, as if stating an obvious business conclusion. "Michael, I thought we had something real," Jasmine whispered, tears beginning to form despite her determination to remain composed. He laughed, a sound that cut deeper than any blade. "You were convenient, Jasmine. An interesting distraction." He walked to the bar cart and poured himself 2 fingers of expensive bourbon. "But a black child has no place in my family or in Thompson business. my father would disinherit me. "It's 2008, not 1950, she protested, her voice rising with indignation. Michael took a slow sip of his drink, regarding her over the crystal tumbler. "In my world, some things never change." He set the glass down with a sharp click against the marble. "You're simply not enough for someone at my social level. You'd never be introduced to the right people, never be accepted in the circles I frequent." Each word hit Jasmine like a physical blow. She'd heard rumors about the Thompson family's old-fashioned values, but had convinced herself they were exaggerations, that Michael was different, that their connection transcended such outdated thinking. "What am I supposed to do?" she asked, hating the vulnerability in her voice. "Handle this problem and move on with your life." He spoke as if discussing a minor inconvenience. "Your scholarship at NYU, your future. You have potential. Don't throw it all away for an unplanned pregnancy." "Handle this problem," Jasmine repeated, her voice hardening as the full meaning of his words sank in. "You're smart. I'm sure you understand what I'm saying." He straightened his tie, already mentally moving on to other matters. "I have an early meeting tomorrow. You should probably go." "Go? This is my apartment," he corrected coldly. "Company-owned, actually, for entertaining clients and associates." Jasmine grabbed her coat, dignity the only possession she refused to leave behind. At the door, she turned back. "You'll regret this, Michael." His expression remained impassive. "I highly doubt that." The next morning, Jasmine arrived at the Thompson real estate offices to find her desk emptied, her personal items stuffed into a cardboard box. The HR director, who had always been friendly, wouldn't meet her eyes as she explained that Jasmine's unsatisfactory performance had led to the termination of her internship. "But my performance reviews have all been excellent," Jasmine protested, clutching the box to her chest. "The decision came from upper management." The woman slid a document across the desk. "You'll need to sign this non-disclosure agreement regarding your time with the company." "And if I don't? Then we can't provide any references for your future employment." With shaking hands, Jasmine signed. Outside, she tried calling Michael, only to discover her number had been blocked. Her company email had already been deactivated. All traces of her existence at Thompson Real Estate and in Michael's life had been efficiently erased. The following week brought more devastation. A letter from NYU informed her that her scholarship had been suspended due to excessive absences caused by debilitating morning sickness that left her unable to attend early classes. Without the scholarship, she couldn't afford tuition. Without the internship, she had no income. In her rented room in the Bronx, Jasmine spread her resources across the bed. $267 in her bank account, a growing stack of medical bills, and rent due in 2 weeks. Her college friends, mostly from affluent families, had gradually drifted away when she could no longer keep up with their lifestyle of brunches and shopping trips. When her phone rang, she answered hopefully, thinking perhaps Michael had reconsidered. Instead, it was her doctor's office, confirming what the ultrasound had revealed that morning. "Ms. Williams, we wanted to make sure you understood what we discovered today," the nurse said gently. "You're not carrying just one baby, but 3. You're having triplets." Sitting on the bus heading home, rain pounding against the windows, Jasmine finally allowed herself to cry. Not the quiet tears of disappointment, but deep, body-racking sobs that caused other passengers to shift uncomfortably away from her. When the storm of emotion passed, she placed her hand on her still flat abdomen. "You will never know that man," she promised quietly. "You will have so much more than he could ever offer." In the months that followed, Jasmine took whatever work she could find: cashier at a supermarket during the day, data entry clerk at night. Between shifts, she built a simple app to manage her minimal finances and noticed that small neighborhood businesses could use something similar. During the few free hours between jobs, she developed a basic version of a payment system for local shops. Her mother, a retired math teacher, helped when she could, bringing home-cooked meals and sitting with Jasmine as she coded late into the night. "What are you trying to prove, sweetheart?" her mother asked one evening, watching Jasmine work despite her swollen ankles and exhaustion. "That I'm more than enough," Jasmine replied without looking up from her laptop. "That we all are." When she gave birth to 3 healthy boys, Mason, Malcolm, and Miles, Jasmine transformed her rented room into an improvised office, with the babies sleeping in donated cribs while she programmed until dawn. The boys had her determination and quick intelligence, but their eyes, identical piercing green eyes, came from the father they would never meet. Late one night, as the triplets slept peacefully, Jasmine looked at their innocent faces and made a silent vow. "I'm going to show him that I am more than enough," she whispered. "I'm going to build something so extraordinary that he'll have to swallow every word he said." As the bus moved through the rainy Bronx night, Jasmine couldn't have imagined that 15 years later she would command a tech company valued at hundreds of millions, and that the man who rejected her would be begging for a place in the life he had despised. As the bus moved through the rainy Bronx night, Jasmine couldn't have imagined that 15 years later she would command a tech company valued at hundreds of millions, and that the man who rejected her would be begging for a place in the life he had despised. For now she had more immediate concerns, namely, how to survive the next 9 months and beyond. The following morning, Jasmine sat across from a middle-aged manager at Brightway Supermarket, her resume clutched in trembling hands. She'd applied to 17 positions over the past week, but this was the first interview she'd secured. "Your qualifications are impressive," the manager said, flipping through her resume. "NYU business program, internship at Thompson Real Estate." He looked up, eyebrows raised. "Why would you want to work as a cashier here?" Jasmine shifted uncomfortably in her seat, acutely aware of the slight roundness beginning to show beneath her blouse at 16 weeks pregnant. "I'm taking a break from my studies to handle some personal matters. I need steady income in the meantime." The manager's gaze dropped to her midsection, his expression changing. "I see." He closed her resume folder. "The position requires standing for 8-hour shifts and lifting up to 20 pounds. Would that be problematic for you?" "Not at all," Jasmine replied firmly, though her swollen ankles already ached at the thought. He nodded slowly. "We can offer you 29 hours weekly. Keeping it under 30 means we don't provide benefits." He named an hourly wage that would barely cover her rent. "When can you start?" "Tomorrow," she answered without hesitation. 3 days later, Jasmine started her second job, night shift data entry at a medical billing company. From 8 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon, she stood at a Brightway checkout counter, scanning groceries and making small talk with customers. From 6 in the evening until midnight, she sat in a windowless office, entering endless streams of numbers into an outdated database system. By the time she arrived at her small rented room each night, her feet had swollen to the point where she had to pry her shoes off, and her back screamed in protest as she lowered herself onto her narrow bed. But it was the only way to survive. The combined income from both jobs would, just barely, cover her rent, utilities, food, and the mounting prenatal medical expenses. "You can't keep this up," her mother said one evening, massaging Jasmine's feet while she ate a reheated dinner at 1 in the morning. "You're carrying 3 babies. Your body needs rest." "What choice do I have, Mom?" Jasmine's voice cracked with exhaustion. "I can't move back home. Dad's medical bills already have you and Dad struggling to keep the house. I can't go back to school without the scholarship, and I can't—" Her hand moved protectively over her growing belly. "I won't give them up." Her mother's eyes softened. "I know, baby. We'll figure something out." One night, in the precious 2 hours between her jobs, Jasmine found herself staring at her meager bank balance on her laptop. $216. After paying rent, she'd have barely enough for groceries, let alone the specialized prenatal vitamins her doctor had prescribed for the triplet pregnancy. Frustrated, She opened a spreadsheet and began categorizing her expenses, creating a rudimentary budget tracker. She color-coded items by necessity: red for essential bills, yellow for needs that could be postponed, green for the few small luxuries she still permitted herself, like the occasional decaf coffee on her morning commute. As she worked, an idea began to form. The next evening, while waiting for the subway, she noticed Mr. Gonzalez, the owner of the bodega near her apartment, calculating the day's receipts with a well-worn calculator and a paper ledger. There must be an easier way for him to do that, she thought. That night, after her data entry shift, Jasmine stayed up until 3 in the morning, using her coding skills from her business technology courses to build a simple application. It wasn't sophisticated, just a basic system to track inventory, sales, and expenses, but it was intuitive and designed specifically for small business owners with limited technical knowledge. 2 days later, she nervously approached Mr. Gonzalez. "I noticed you spend a lot of time on your bookkeeping," she began. "I created something that might help." He looked skeptical, but allowed her to demonstrate the application on her laptop. 20 minutes later, his weathered face broke into a wide smile. "This would save me hours every week. How much you want for it?" Jasmine hadn't thought that far ahead. "How about I set it up for you, and if it works well after a month, you can pay me what you think it's worth?" A month later, Mr. Gonzalez handed her $50, a fortune in her current circumstances. "Worth every penny," he declared. "My cousin runs a laundromat on Fordham Road. He wants to know if you can make one for him too." By her 6th month of pregnancy, Jasmine had installed her simple management application in 5 neighborhood businesses. The extra income wasn't substantial, but it allowed her to cut back her data entry hours slightly, giving her precious additional time to rest her increasingly taxed body. Her pregnancy was becoming impossible to hide. The Brightway manager reassigned her to the back stockroom. "For your safety," he claimed, though Jasmine suspected it had more to do with customer perceptions. Her data entry supervisor frowned every time she took bathroom breaks, which were becoming increasingly frequent as the triplets pressed against her bladder. During a routine checkup, her obstetrician's face grew serious as she checked Jasmine's blood pressure. "It's too high," she said. "You're showing signs of preeclampsia, which is particularly dangerous with multiples. You need to reduce your stress and get more rest." Jasmine laughed hollowly. "That's not really an option, doctor." The doctor removed her stethoscope, her expression softening. "Ms. Williams, I understand your situation is difficult, but you're putting yourself and your babies at risk. Is there family who can help? The father of the babies, perhaps?" Jasmine's face hardened. "There is no father in the picture, and my parents can barely make ends meet themselves." That night, Jasmine collapsed on her bed, tears streaming down her face. For the first time since Michael's rejection, she allowed herself to feel the full weight of her situation. She'd lost her education, her career path, and any semblance of financial security. At 22, with triplets on the way and no support system beyond her struggling parents, the future looked impossibly bleak. Her gaze fell on her laptop, where the simple application she'd created glowed on the screen. In a moment of clarity, she realized it represented something beyond a few extra dollars. It was proof that she could create value, solve problems, and help others even from her precarious position. Wiping her tears, she opened her code editor and began refining the application, making it more user-friendly and adding features that her small business clients had requested. If 5 installations could bring in a couple $100, what might 50 bring? Or 500? "We're going to be okay," she whispered to her unborn children, her hand resting on her swollen abdomen. "Somehow, we're going to make this work." 2 weeks later, Jasmine was standing at the register in a Korean grocery store waiting to pay for a carton of milk when she felt a sharp pain that made her gasp and clutch the counter for support. "Miss, you okay?" the concerned clerk asked. "I think I need to sit down," Jasmine managed to say before another wave of pain hit her. "And maybe call an ambulance." Hours later, In the labor and delivery ward of Bronx Lebanon Hospital, Jasmine gripped the rails of her bed as contractions tore through her body. "It's too early," she kept repeating to the nurses. "They're not due for another 6 weeks." "Triplets often come early, sweetheart," an older nurse reassured her. "The NICU is ready for them. You just focus on bringing these babies into the world." Alone in the delivery room, without a partner to hold her hand or whisper encouragement, Jasmine found strength she didn't know she possessed. After 14 hours of labor, Mason arrived first, weighing 4 pounds, 3 ounces. Malcolm followed 7 minutes later at 4 pounds even. Miles, the smallest at 3 pounds, 12 ounces, made his entrance 10 minutes after his brothers. They were whisked immediately to the NICU, tiny fighters already showing the determination they'd inherited from their mother. Jasmine, exhausted beyond words, was allowed only brief visits during those first critical days. Standing outside the NICU window, her mother beside her, Jasmine watched her sons sleeping in their incubators, connected to monitors and feeding tubes. "They're so small," she whispered. "But strong," her mother replied. "Like you." 2 weeks later, against all odds, Jasmine brought her 3 baby boys home to her tiny rented room. The space, barely adequate for 1 person, now had to accommodate 4. 3 donated cribs lined one wall, while her desk and laptop occupied the only remaining corner. Her maternity leave from Brightway was unpaid and she'd lost the data entry position entirely. The small income from her application installations was now their only resource beyond the limited government assistance she'd reluctantly applied for. Late one night, with all 3 babies miraculously asleep at once, Jasmine sat at her desk, attempting to code while keeping 1 foot on each of the outer cribs, gently rocking them. Her laptop balanced precariously on her knees as she refined her application, adding features that would make it more valuable to struggling neighborhood businesses. Mrs. Kim from the Korean grocery store had paid her $75 for an installation, mentioning that the system had already saved her hours of paperwork. "You should charge more," she'd told Jasmine. "This worth much more." As dawn broke over the Bronx, Jasmine finally completed the latest version of her application. She'd added inventory tracking features and a simple customer loyalty program that small businesses could implement without expensive infrastructure. Looking at her sleeping sons, their tiny chests rising and falling in perfect synchrony, she felt a fierce protectiveness wash over her. "You will never know that man," she whispered, echoing her promise from months earlier. "But you will know that your mother never gave up, never stopped fighting for you." She gently touched each baby's cheek, marveling at their perfect features and the unmistakable green eyes they'd all inherited from Michael. "I'm going to build something for us," she promised. "Something he could never imagine." When the ambulance took her to the hospital, Jasmine clutched her laptop against her chest, not knowing that it contained not just a simple application, but the seed of an empire that would one day make Michael Thompson look small in comparison. When the ambulance took her to the hospital, Jasmine clutched her laptop against her chest, not knowing that it contained not just a simple application, but the seed of an empire that would one day make Michael Thompson look small in comparison. 3 months later, Jasmine stood in the doorway of her tiny Bronx apartment, surveying the chaos that had become her life. 3 donated cribs lined the wall opposite her small desk, where her laptop sat open amidst a sea of baby bottles, formula cans, and programming books. The triplets, Mason, Malcolm, and Miles, were finally asleep after what felt like an eternity of crying, feeding, and diaper changes. At 3 months old, they were still tiny but growing steadily. The NICU doctors had been amazed by their progress, calling them fighters at every checkup. Jasmine knew where that fighting spirit came from, certainly not from the father who had discarded them before they were even born. "You boys sleep for at least 2 hours, okay?" she whispered, tiptoeing to her desk. "Mommy has work to do." Sleep deprivation had become her constant companion. Between caring for 3 infants and attempting to develop her application further, Jasmine rarely slept more than 3 hours at a stretch. Dark circles had taken permanent residence under her eyes, and her clothes hung loose on her frame. Her mother visited every afternoon, bringing home-cooked meals and giving Jasmine a precious hour to shower and sometimes nap. Today, she had brought more than food. "I spoke with Mrs. Chen at the community center," her mother said, cradling Malcolm while Jasmine ate her first proper meal of the day. "She said they might be able to help with childcare 2 mornings a week, volunteers from the senior center." Jasmine looked up from her plate, hope flickering across her exhausted face. "Really? That would be incredible, Mom. You can't keep going like this, sweetheart. You're running yourself into the ground." "What choice do I have?" Jasmine's voice cracked. "The welfare assistance barely covers formula and diapers. My savings are gone. And these boys?" She looked at her sons with fierce love. "They deserve everything." Her mother reached across the table to squeeze her hand. "You're stronger than anyone I've ever known, Jasmine. But even the strongest need help sometimes." That evening, after her mother left, Jasmine received a text from Tanya, one of her few remaining friends from NYU. They had been close during freshman and sophomore year, but since the pregnancy, their contact had dwindled to occasional messages. "Hey, stranger, having drinks at Leban tonight. Join us? It's been forever." Jasmine looked around her apartment, at the laundry piled high, the stack of programming books she was studying to improve her coding skills, the 3 infants who depended on her for everything. The rooftop bar at the Standard Hotel might as well have been on another planet. "Can't tonight. Rain check? Miss you," she replied, knowing the rain check would never come. Instead of dwelling on what she'd lost, Jasmine turned to her laptop. During the boys' precious synchronized nap times, she had been steadily improving her application, which she'd named Local Pay. After installing it in 8 local businesses, she'd started receiving calls from other store owners who had heard about her system. Mrs. Chen from the community center had introduced her to Mr. Washington, who owned a barber shop 2 blocks away. "This young lady has created something special," she'd told him. "Better than those expensive systems the big companies try to sell you." Mr. Washington had been skeptical until Jasmine demonstrated how Local Pay could track appointments, inventory for hair products, and process payments all in one simple interface. "How much you charging for this?" he'd asked. $100 for installation and $20 monthly for support, she'd replied, her voice more confident than she felt. He'd nodded slowly. "Worth every penny if it works as good as you say." That had been 2 weeks ago. Yesterday, Mr. Washington had called to say he'd recommended Local Pay to 3 other barbershop owners in Harlem. "They're tired of the big payment companies charging them excessive fees," he'd explained. "Your system saves them money and gives them more control." As she coded into the night, adding features requested by her growing client base, Jasmine couldn't help but think about Michael. Was he still at Thompson Real Estate, building on the empire his family had created? Did he ever wonder about the children he had rejected? Her bitter reflections were interrupted by a wail from Mason's crib. Within seconds, Malcolm and Miles joined the chorus. Jasmine sighed, saved her work, and pushed thoughts of Michael aside. Her reality was here, in this tiny apartment, with 3 babies who needed her. I'm coming," she murmured, her exhaustion momentarily forgotten as she lifted Mason into her arms. "Mommy's here." One morning, as winter grudgingly gave way to spring, Jasmine bundled the triplets into their second-hand stroller, a massive contraption that barely fit through doorways, and made her way to the community center. Mrs. Chen had arranged for her to meet with a group of small business owners who were interested in Local Pay. The trip, normally a 10-minute walk, took nearly 45 minutes with 3 infants. By the time she arrived, Jasmine was sweating despite the cool March air. She parked the stroller in the meeting room corner, praying the boys would remain calm for at least part of her presentation. "This is Ms. Williams and her Local Pay system," Mrs. Chen announced to the 8 business owners gathered around a table. "And those are her assistants," she added with a smile, nodding toward the triplets. For the next 20 minutes, Jasmine demonstrated her application on her laptop, explaining how it could replace expensive point-of-sale systems with something more affordable and customizable. The business owners asked practical questions about security, reliability, and support. "I provide installation and training personally," Jasmine explained, "and I'm available by phone for troubleshooting." "When you're not changing diapers, you mean?" one woman commented, not unkindly. Jasmine smiled, her exhaustion momentarily visible. "I manage." As if on cue, Miles began to fuss. Jasmine tensed, knowing that where one started, the others would soon follow. She tried to continue her presentation while gently rocking the stroller with her foot. Mrs. Chen stepped in smoothly. "Why don't I take the little ones to the senior room? The ladies there would love to help." Before Jasmine could object, an elderly volunteer appeared and wheeled the stroller away. The brief panic Jasmine felt at being separated from her sons was tempered by the extraordinary relief of having her hands free for a few minutes. By the end of the meeting, she had signed up 6 new clients. As she counted the deposit checks, a powerful realization struck her. She had just earned more in 1 hour than she would have in 2 weeks at her old supermarket job. That night, after putting the boys to bed, Jasmine called her mother with tears in her eyes. "I think this might actually work, Mom. I think local pay could become something real." "I always knew you would find a way," her mother replied. "You're rebuilding, one day at a time." As the triplets passed their 6-month milestone, Jasmine established a precarious but functional routine. Mornings were devoted to the boys, feeding, bathing, and the developmental exercises recommended by their pediatrician. Afternoons, while her mother or community center volunteers helped with childcare, she installed local pay systems and trained business owners. Evenings and late nights were for coding improvements and handling support calls. The boys were thriving despite their challenging start. Mason, the largest, was already attempting to crawl. Malcolm watched everything with an intensity that reminded Jasmine of herself. Miles, the smallest, compensated with determination, often managing to roll across the room to reach a desired toy. "They're remarkably advanced for their age," the pediatrician commented during their 6-month checkup, "especially considering they were premature." Jasmine beamed with pride. "They're fighters." "They clearly have excellent care," the doctor added, looking at Jasmine with respect. Not many single parents could manage triplets so well. The compliment warmed her, but the reality remained harsh. Her apartment was too small, her resources too limited, and her support system too fragile for long-term stability. Local pay was growing. She now had 27 clients across the Bronx and Upper Manhattan, but scaling the business while caring for 3 infants seemed impossible. One evening, as she sat cross-legged on the floor with the boys during their tummy time, her laptop open beside her, Jasmine noticed Malcolm staring at the screen with unusual focus. At 6 months, he shouldn't have been interested in a display of code, yet his eyes tracked the cursor as she typed. "You like that, don't you?" she said softly. "Are you going to be my little programmer?" Malcolm gurgled in response, his tiny hand reaching toward the keyboard. Mason, not to be outdone, pulled himself forward in a determined pre-crawling movement, while Miles rolled onto his back, kicking excitedly. Looking at her sons, Jasmine felt a fierce protectiveness surge through her. These boys deserved every opportunity, the best schools, the best health care, the best future possible. Not just adequate, not just getting by, but truly thriving. "We're going to make it," she promised them. "And one day, you'll have everything that man said we weren't good enough to have." As if understanding her words, all 3 boys looked up at her with identical green eyes, Michael's eyes, but filled with trust and love that was entirely for her. The next day, Jasmine received an unexpected call from a business development officer at Bronx Community Federal Credit Union. One of her clients had mentioned local pay during a loan consultation. "We're interested in seeing your system," the officer explained. "We work with many small businesses that struggle with expensive payment processing." The meeting was scheduled for the following week. For the first time in months, Jasmine splurged on a new blouse from a discount store. She asked her mother to watch the boys, spent hours preparing her presentation, and even practiced her pitch in front of the bathroom mirror. The credit union's interest was more than she had dared hope for. If they recommended local pay to their business clients, it could mean dozens of new installations. The potential income could allow her to hire help, maybe even rent a larger apartment. On the morning of the meeting, Jasmine dressed carefully in her new blouse and the one decent pair of slacks that still fit her post-pregnancy body. She kissed each of her sons goodbye, lingering a moment longer than usual. "Wish Mommy luck," she whispered to them. "Today might change everything." At the credit union, Jasmine presented local pay with confidence born of necessity and countless nights of preparation. The business development team asked tough questions, but she had answers ready. They tested the system, examining its security features and user interface. "This is impressive work," the senior officer finally said, "especially coming from a self-taught developer. We'd like to discuss a potential partnership." The words Jasmine had been waiting to hear. She maintained her professional composure during the rest of the meeting, but inside, her heart soared with vindication and hope. Walking home afterward, she passed a newsstand with the latest issue of New York Real Estate Journal. Michael Thompson's face stared back at her from the cover, under the headline, "Rising Star, Thompson Heir Revolutionizes Family Business." For a moment, Jasmine stood frozen, the familiar features bringing back a flood of painful memories. She could almost hear his dismissive voice, "You're simply not enough for someone at my social level." Instead of the crushing pain she might have felt months ago, Jasmine experienced something different, determination crystallizing into unshakable resolve. She would build local pay into something extraordinary, not for revenge, but to create the future her sons deserved. That night, in her tiny apartment with 3 babies sleeping peacefully in their cribs, Jasmine mapped out an expansion plan for local pay on the back of an electric bill envelope. As she worked, she whispered a new promise to her sleeping children. "One day, his world will know your names, not as Thompson's rejected sons, but as William's pride." When she finally fell asleep at her desk, Jasmine clutched a business card from the credit union, not knowing it represented the first institutional recognition of what would eventually become a financial technology empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. When she finally fell asleep at her desk, Jasmine clutched a business card from the credit union, not knowing it represented the first institutional recognition of what would eventually become a financial technology empire worth hundreds of millions of dollars. 3 years passed in a blur of sleepless nights, coding sessions, and precious milestones. The triplets' first words, first steps, and first birthday parties marked the passage of time, alongside local pay's growing client list. What had begun as a simple application for neighborhood businesses had evolved into a small but respected company with 5 employees working from a modest office in the Bronx. On a crisp autumn morning, Jasmine stood in that office, a converted storefront with mismatched furniture and second-hand computers, addressing her team. Sunlight streamed through the large front window, illuminating the local pay logo she'd painted on the wall herself. "We've reached 100 clients across New York City," she announced, unable to keep the pride from her voice. "That's double our target for the quarter." Her small team, 2 developers, a customer service representative, and 2 installation specialists, broke into applause. All were local hires, people from the neighborhood who had been overlooked by Manhattan's gleaming tech companies. "None of this would be possible without each of you believing in what we're building," Jasmine continued. "A payment system that actually serves communities banks have abandoned." In the corner of the office, the triplets, now 3 years old, played in a space Jasmine had set up with toys, books, and small desks. Mason was meticulously stacking blocks, his brow furrowed in concentration. Malcolm sat with a tablet, tapping at an educational game with surprising dexterity. Miles was reading a picture book, turning pages and narrating his own story. Jasmine's gaze lingered on her sons. her chest tightening with love and determination. Every day they looked more like Michael, those unmistakable green eyes, the shape of their jaws, the way Mason tilted his head when curious. But their spirit, their resilience, that was all Williams. The celebration was interrupted by the office phone ringing. Jasmine's customer service representative, Tanya, answered, her expression quickly shifting to concern. "It's Mr. Rivera from the bodega on 183rd, she whispered, covering the receiver. "Chase Bank rejected his loan application again. He's asking if you could call him back." Jasmine nodded, unsurprised. This was a story she'd heard repeatedly from their clients. Small business owners denied basic financial services by traditional banks, despite years of operation and steady profits. That afternoon, she visited Rivera's bodega personally. The small grocery store had been serving the neighborhood for 20 years, providing fresh produce in an area otherwise considered a food desert. "3 times they reject me," Mr. Rivera said, his accent thickening with frustration. 20 years I run this store, never miss a payment, and they say I'm high risk. What they mean is I'm in the wrong zip code." Jasmine nodded, understanding all too well how financial institutions viewed certain neighborhoods. "Let me see the application they rejected." As she reviewed the paperwork, an idea began forming, one that would eventually transform local pay from a point-of-sale system into something much more comprehensive. "What if we could provide small loans ourselves?" she mused aloud, "using the payment data we already collect to assess risk more accurately than traditional banks?" Mr. Rivera looked at her skeptically. "You going to become a bank now?" "Not exactly," Jasmine replied, her mind racing with possibilities. "But maybe we could be something better for businesses like yours." Back at the office, Jasmine opened her laptop and began researching lending regulations and microfinance models. The triplets played nearby, occasionally bringing her drawings or asking questions that she answered absently, her focus consumed by this new vision. When her phone rang, she answered without checking the caller ID. "Is this Jasmine Williams?" a polished male voice inquired. "Yes, speaking." "This is Richard Kensington from First Manhattan Bank. We'd like to discuss your payment processing application." Jasmine straightened in her chair, instantly alert. First Manhattan was one of the largest banks in the city, exactly the type of institution that had been ignoring businesses in communities like the Bronx for decades. "I'm listening," she replied cautiously. "We've noticed your growing presence in underserved markets. Very impressive work. We'd like to explore a potential partnership or acquisition." The words hung in the air, loaded with implications. This could mean resources, expansion, legitimacy, everything she'd been working toward. But something in the banker's tone, the casual way he referred to her clients' neighborhoods as underserved markets, triggered her wariness. "I'd be happy to meet," she said carefully. "But I should be clear that Local Pay's mission is to serve communities that traditional banks have neglected." Of course," Kensington replied smoothly. "That's precisely what interests us, the untapped potential in these areas." 3 days later, Jasmine found herself in a gleaming conference room on the 42nd floor of a Manhattan skyscraper. She'd left the triplets with her mother, worn her one decent blazer over a simple black dress, and brought comprehensive documentation of Local Pay's growth and client satisfaction rates. Across the polished table sat 4 executives in expensive suits, examining her presentation with expressions ranging from skepticism to predatory interest. "Your user interface is rudimentary," noted one, "but your client retention rate is remarkable." 97%, Jasmine confirmed. "Because we design with our users' actual needs in mind, not what we think they should want." Kensington leaned forward. "Ms. Williams, let's be direct. We're prepared to offer $2 million to acquire Local Pay's technology and client list." The number hung in the air. $2 million. Enough to secure her son's education, buy a proper home, provide the stability she'd been fighting for since that snowy night when Michael had discarded her. "And the team?" she asked. My employees? A slight hesitation. We would evaluate them individually for potential integration into our existing structure. Translation? They'd be let go. And the business model? The accessibility for small merchants? Another executive spoke up. We'd incorporate the technology into our existing payment processing framework. Naturally, there would be some standardization of fees and requirements. Translation: prices would rise, and many of her current clients would no longer qualify. Jasmine closed her laptop slowly, her decision crystallizing. Gentlemen, I appreciate your interest, but local pay isn't for sale, at least not under these terms. Kensington's smile tightened. Perhaps you should take some time to consider. $2 million is substantial for a small operation like yours. It's not about the money, Jasmine replied, rising from her chair. It's about the communities we serve. If you're genuinely interested in partnership, I'm open to discussions that preserve our mission and team. Otherwise, I'll have to decline. As the elevator descended from the 42nd floor, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text from her mother. The boys made you something special. Hurry home. The contrast between the sterile corporate environment she was leaving and the chaotic, love-filled home awaiting her couldn't have been starker. She knew she'd made the right decision. That evening, surrounded by hand-drawn pictures from her sons, Jasmine outlined a new strategy for local pay. If traditional banks were finally noticing the potential in communities they'd ignored, it meant she was onto something significant. But instead of selling out, she would double down on her original vision. The next morning, she called an emergency team meeting. First Manhattan Bank offered to buy us yesterday, she announced, watching shock register on her employees' faces. I turned them down. You what? Tanya gasped. How much did they offer? $2 million, Jasmine replied calmly. The room erupted in disbelief. Listen, Jasmine continued, raising her hand for silence. They didn't want our mission, just our technology and client list. They would have raised fees, imposed stricter requirements, and most of you would have lost your jobs. She unfolded a large piece of paper on the conference table, a roadmap she'd stayed up all night creating. Instead, we're going to expand. Not just payment processing, but small business loans, financial literacy training, and community investment funds. We'll build what our neighborhoods actually need, not what Wall Street thinks they should have. 1 week later, Jasmine stood nervously outside the entrance to Bronx Community Federal Credit Union, the triplets fidgeting beside her in their best clothes. She'd enrolled them in a prestigious preschool the previous month, a progressive institution that offered scholarships to promising local children. Today was their entrance interview. Remember what we practiced, she whispered, straightening Miles's collar. Be yourselves, be polite, and it's okay to ask questions. Mason looked up at her with solemn green eyes. Will they ask about our daddy? The question caught Jasmine off guard. The boys had been asking more frequently lately, noticing the fathers who picked up other children at the park or appeared in their storybooks. They might, she answered honestly. And you can say that we're a family of 4, you 3 and me. Some families have 2 parents, some have 1, some have grandparents or aunts and uncles. All that matters is the love. But where is he? Malcolm persisted, his analytical mind always seeking complete information. Jasmine knelt to their level, choosing her words carefully. He wasn't ready to be a father. Sometimes adults make choices that hurt other people. But that choice made us stronger together. The school interview went remarkably well. The teachers were impressed by the triplets' advanced vocabulary, Mason's numerical skills, Malcolm's logical reasoning, and Miles's verbal fluency. Jasmine tried not to beam too obviously when the director mentioned they were operating at cognitive levels typical of children at least a year older. As they left the building, a magazine in the waiting area caught Jasmine's eye, a business publication with a familiar face on the cover. Michael Thompson, now sporting a designer beard and the confident smile of inherited privilege, above the headline, Thompson Real Estate expands to Boston, third-generation heir leads family business into new markets. For a brief moment, anger flared in Jasmine's chest. While she had been struggling to feed 3 babies on minimum wage, he had been advancing effortlessly through a career paved by family connections and wealth. She turned away from the magazine, guiding her sons toward the exit. His world, with its glossy magazine covers and generational wealth, had no place for them. But they were building something different, something that wouldn't have existed if he had made a different choice that snowy night. 2 days later, Jasmine received the preschool acceptance letters, along with partial scholarships for all 3 boys. That same afternoon, a representative from a regional business development conference called to invite her to speak on a panel titled Innovation in Community Finance. As she prepared her presentation that evening, after putting the boys to bed in their small but cozy apartment, Jasmine felt a surge of confidence that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with vindication. She was creating something meaningful, not despite Michael's rejection, but because of the strength she'd discovered in its aftermath. Looking at her presentation for the conference, Jasmine didn't know that her speech would catch the attention of venture capital investors who, in just 2 years, would value her company at over $100 million, a sum that would make Michael Thompson's personal fortune seem modest by comparison. Looking at her presentation for the conference, Jasmine didn't know that her speech would catch the attention of venture capital investors who, in just 2 years, would value her company at over $100 million, a sum that would make Michael Thompson's personal fortune seem modest by comparison. 5 years had passed since that snowy night when Michael Thompson had tossed aside Jasmine's pregnancy test like a contaminated object. 5 years of struggle, growth, and determination that had transformed her from a devastated young woman into the founder and CEO of a promising fintech startup. On a bright spring morning, Jasmine stood before the mirror in her small bathroom, applying a touch of mascara, a rare indulgence in her typically minimal morning routine. Today was significant. She would be interviewed for a niche technology magazine called Digital Disruptors that focused on emerging entrepreneurs in the tech space. "Mommy, Malcolm won't share the tablet," Miles called from the living room, his voice carrying the distinctive whine of a 4-year-old seeking intervention. "3 more minutes, Malcolm, then it's Miles's turn," Jasmine responded, her voice firm but gentle. "Mason, how's your drawing coming along?" 5 years of single motherhood had taught her to multitask with military precision. She could apply makeup, mediate sibling disputes, and mentally rehearse interview talking points simultaneously. The apartment, while still modest, was a significant upgrade from the tiny room where she'd once crammed 3 cribs beside her desk. Located in a safer part of the Bronx, it had 2 bedrooms, one for her, one shared by the boys, and a small but functional kitchen where they ate meals together every evening. Jasmine finished her makeup and walked into the living room, where her sons were engaged in their morning activities. At 4 years old, the triplets were identical in appearance but increasingly distinct in personality. Mason, the most mathematically inclined, could already add double-digit numbers in his head. Malcolm, quiet and observant, could navigate technology with intuitive ease. Miles, verbally precocious, spoke in complex sentences and asked questions that sometimes left Jasmine scrambling for age-appropriate answers. "Remember, Grandma is picking you up for your playdate at the park," she reminded them, gathering her materials for the interview. "I'll meet you there after my meeting." "Will you bring snacks?" Mason asked, practical as always. "Yes, and if the interview goes well, maybe we'll get ice cream to celebrate." A knock at the door announced the arrival of Jasmine's mother, who entered with the energy and warmth that had sustained Jasmine through countless difficult days. "There are my brilliant grandsons," she exclaimed, opening her arms as 3 small bodies launched themselves at her. "Thanks for watching them, Mom," Jasmine said, checking her watch. "The interview shouldn't take more than an hour, and then I have a client installation at 2. Her mother waved away the thanks. "Go show that reporter what you're made of. We'll be fine." The interview took place at a small coffee shop in Brooklyn, where Jasmine met with a young journalist eager to cover innovative startups focusing on underserved communities. As she explained LocalPay's mission and growth, now serving over 10,000 small businesses across New York's outer boroughs, Jasmine felt a confidence that would have been unimaginable 5 years earlier. What inspired you to create a payment system specifically for marginalized neighborhoods? The journalist asked, leaning forward with genuine interest. Necessity, Jasmine answered honestly. I saw business owners in my community struggling with expensive, complex payment systems designed without their needs in mind. When major financial institutions ignore certain zip codes, innovation has to come from within those communities. The journalist nodded, scribbling notes. And how do you balance running a growing company with raising triplets as a single mother? The question was expected but still stung slightly. Male entrepreneurs were rarely asked about their parenting arrangements. The same way many parents do, with a support network, careful scheduling, and very little sleep, Jasmine replied with a smile. But I've designed my company with flexibility in mind, not just for myself, but for all our employees. Many of our team members are parents or caregivers. As the interview concluded, the journalist handed Jasmine her card. This piece will run in next month's issue. Your story is exactly what our readers are interested in, real solutions from authentic entrepreneurs. Jasmine tucked the card into her wallet, alongside a growing collection of business contacts. Each represented a small victory, another step toward the legitimacy and recognition that Michael had claimed she would never achieve. That afternoon, after installing LocalPay at a Jamaican restaurant in Queens, Jasmine met her mother and the boys at the neighborhood park. Watching her sons race around the playground, their identical faces alight with joy, she felt the familiar mixture of fierce love and determination that had become her constant companion. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Opening it, she nearly dropped the device in shock. Congratulations! You have been selected as a finalist for the National Financial Technology Innovation Award. The ceremony will take place in Chicago next month. Jasmine read the email 3 times, her heart racing. The award was respected industry-wide, typically going to founders from Ivy League backgrounds with substantial venture capital backing. That she had even been nominated, much less selected as a finalist, was extraordinary. Her mother noticed her expression. Good news? Potentially life-changing, Jasmine replied, her voice barely above a whisper. That evening, after the boys were asleep, Jasmine researched the award and its implications. Previous winners had secured major funding rounds within months of receiving the recognition. The visibility alone could transform LocalPay's trajectory. However, attending would mean 3 days away from the triplets, the longest she would have ever been separated from them. The thought created a knot of anxiety in her stomach, but she knew this opportunity was too significant to miss. The following week brought another breakthrough. The progressive preschool where the triplets had been attending part-time offered them full scholarships to attend their accelerated program 5 days a week. Their assessment scores are remarkable, the director explained during a meeting in her colorful office, particularly in mathematics for Mason, spatial reasoning for Malcolm, and verbal comprehension for Miles. We believe they would benefit tremendously from our full-time program. Pride swelled in Jasmine's chest. They would love that. But I need to be transparent. Even with scholarships, the additional hours might be financially challenging for us right now. The director smiled warmly. We've secured special funding for exceptional students from underrepresented backgrounds. Everything would be covered, including extended day programs if your work schedule requires it. Driving home, Jasmine couldn't stop smiling. Her sons would receive the educational foundation she had always wanted for them, the kind that opened doors to opportunities typically reserved for children of privilege. Children like Michael would have had. The thought of him surfaced unexpectedly, as it sometimes did in moments of achievement. Where was he now? Did he ever think about the children, he had so callously rejected? Her reflections were interrupted by a call from David Chen, the angel investor who had provided LocalPay's initial funding. "Jasmine, have you seen the news?" he asked without preamble. "What news?" "Citibank just announced a new initiative targeting underbanked urban communities with simplified payment processing and microloans. Sound familiar?" Jasmine felt her stomach drop. "They're copying our model." "Almost exactly," David confirmed. "They're calling it Community Financial Access Program, launching in the Bronx, Brooklyn, and Queens next month." The irony was bitter. After years of ignoring the communities LocalPay served, a banking giant was swooping in to appropriate their innovation, with resources and reach Jasmine couldn't hope to match. That night, sleep eluded her. She paced her small living room reviewing options and scenarios. Citibank could easily undercut LocalPay's pricing, at least temporarily. They could offer flashy incentives to lure away clients. They had marketing budgets that dwarfed her entire company's valuation. At 3 in the morning, staring at spreadsheets until the numbers blurred, Jasmine had an epiphany. Citibank might have resources, but they lacked the one thing that had made LocalPay successful: authentic connection to the communities they served. The next morning, Jasmine called an emergency meeting with her team, now 15 people working from their expanded office space. "Citibank is coming after our market," she announced without preamble. "They're launching a program that mimics our services but with deeper pockets behind it." Concerned murmurs filled the room. "But they're missing something crucial," Jasmine continued, her voice strengthening. "They see our clients as an untapped market. We see them as neighbors and partners. That difference is our advantage." She unveiled a whiteboard where she'd sketched a new vision overnight. LocalPay would evolve from a payment processor to a comprehensive community financial platform. They would offer not just transaction services but financial literacy workshops, community investment opportunities, and personalized business development support. "We don't need to just process payments," she explained, the excitement in her voice contagious. "We need to empower entire communities." Her team, initially anxious, gradually caught her enthusiasm. By meeting's end, they had drafted an implementation plan for the expanded services. That evening, as Jasmine prepared dinner for the triplets, Miles asked the question she had been both expecting and dreading. "Mommy, why don't we have a daddy like Tommy from school?" The kitchen fell silent. Mason and Malcolm looked up from their coloring books, equally interested in the answer. Jasmine turned off the stove and sat down at the table, choosing her words carefully. "Families come in many different forms," she began. "Some have 2 parents, others have 1. Some children live with grandparents or aunts or uncles. What matters isn't the number of people, but the love within the family." "But where is our dad?" Mason pressed, always the most direct. "Did he die?" "No, he didn't die," Jasmine answered truthfully. "He wasn't ready to be a father when you were born. Some adults make choices that might seem hard to understand." "Didn't he want us?" Malcolm asked quietly. The question pierced Jasmine's heart. "His choice wasn't about you," she said firmly. "It was about him, and it made us stronger together." Miles climbed into her lap, his small arms wrapping around her neck. "I like our family just us." "Me too," Mason agreed, joining the hug. "And me," Malcolm added, completing the circle. Later that night, after tucking the boys in, Jasmine received an email confirming her spot at the awards ceremony in Chicago, along with an unexpected note. "The committee would be honored if your sons could attend the family portion of the event. Their presence would highlight your extraordinary journey." The gesture brought tears to her eyes. Her boys, once the problem Michael had told her to handle, were now being celebrated alongside her achievements. The following month brought a whirlwind of developments. Jasmine signed the contract for a Series A funding round, $5 million for expansion into 3 additional cities. The boys started their full-time accelerated program, thriving in the structured educational environment, and LocalPay launched its Community Empowerment Initiative, immediately distinguishing itself from Citibank's more transactional approach. On a warm spring evening, Jasmine sat on their small balcony, watching the sunset over the Bronx skyline. Her laptop displayed the draft of her acceptance speech for the upcoming award ceremony. A notification popped up. The first magazine article featuring her was now online. The headline read, "Rising Star: How Jasmine Williams is Revolutionizing Community Finance." She smiled, taking a screenshot to save for her sons. Someday, they would understand the full story of their family's journey. While preparing her presentation for the national award ceremony, Jasmine didn't know that her speech would catch the attention of investors who, in just 2 years, would value her company at over $100 million, a sum that would make Michael Thompson's personal fortune seem modest in comparison. While preparing her presentation for the national award ceremony, Jasmine didn't know that her speech would catch the attention of investors who, in just 2 years, would value her company at over $100 million, a sum that would make Michael Thompson's personal fortune seem modest in comparison. 8 years had transformed everything. The struggling single mother who once couldn't afford formula for her triplets now stood in the sleek glass-walled office of Williams Innovation in downtown Brooklyn, watching her team of 150 employees collaborate across an open floor plan humming with creative energy. Jasmine, now 30 years old, adjusted the collar of her tailored blazer, Armani, purchased last week to celebrate their expansion to their 10th city. "The Chicago office goes live next Tuesday," reported Amara, her chief operating officer, sliding a tablet across the conference table. "That makes 10 major urban markets where traditional banks have historically underserved local businesses." Jasmine nodded, scanning the figures. "And our retention rates?" 94% across all markets, even with First Chicago trying to poach our clients with those predatory introductory rates. Pride swelled in Jasmine's chest. What had begun as a simple payment app built during midnight coding sessions in a tiny Bronx apartment had evolved into a financial technology company that was disrupting how banking worked in communities across America. Williams Innovation now offered not just payment processing but microloans, financial literacy programs, and community investment funds designed specifically for neighborhoods ignored by traditional financial institutions. Her phone vibrated with a news alert. Jasmine glanced down, her breath catching when she saw the notification, "Forbes 30 Under 30, list announced today." With trembling fingers, she opened the email. "Ms. Williams," it began, "we are pleased to inform you that you have been selected for the Forbes 30 Under 30 list in the finance category. Your innovative approach to community banking and remarkable growth metrics have impressed our judges." Jasmine placed the phone down carefully, maintaining her professional composure though her heart raced. This wasn't just personal validation, it was industry recognition at the highest level, the kind that attracted serious investors and opened doors previously sealed shut to someone with her background. "Everything okay?" Amara asked, noticing her expression. "Forbes 30 Under 30, Jasmine replied softly. "We made it." The office erupted in cheers when she shared the news. Jasmine accepted congratulations with gracious nods, but her thoughts immediately turned to 3 people: Mason, Malcolm, and Miles. Now 7 years old, they were the real driving force behind everything she'd built. Later that afternoon, a sleek town car carried Jasmine to the Dalton School, an elite private institution on Manhattan's Upper East Side where the triplets had recently begun attending on partial scholarships. As she walked through the wrought iron gates that had welcomed generations of America's wealthiest families, she couldn't help but remember Michael's cruel words. "You'd never be accepted in the circles I frequent." Yet here she was, her sons now learning alongside the children of Manhattan's elite, not because of a powerful family name, but through their own demonstrated brilliance and her hard-won success. In the school's wood-paneled lobby, Jasmine checked her watch. The admissions meeting would start in 10 minutes. When she'd received the acceptance letters with partial scholarships 3 months earlier, she'd been ecstatic. But as she reviewed the remaining tuition costs, Even with scholarships, the amount was staggering. She'd hesitated, wondering if the financial strain would be worth it. Then she toured the school, the state-of-the-art science labs, the individualized learning programs, the arts facilities, the connections to top universities. The opportunities her sons would have access to made the decision clear. "Ms. Williams, welcome back." The admissions director, a silver-haired woman in a conservative navy suit, extended her hand. "We're thrilled to have your sons with us this year." "How are they adjusting?" Jasmine asked, following her down a corridor lined with student artwork. "Remarkably well. In fact, that's partly why we wanted to meet today. All 3 boys are testing well above grade level in multiple subjects." The meeting room held not just the admissions director but also the boys' primary teacher and the school's educational psychologist. Their expressions were serious but excited. "Ms. Williams," the psychologist began, "we administer standard assessments to all new students. Your son's results were exceptional." She slid 3 folders across the table. Inside each was a comprehensive evaluation detailing cognitive abilities, academic achievements, and social development. The numbers and percentiles highlighted in yellow told a clear story. Mason's mathematical reasoning is in the 99th percentile nationally for children 2 years older than him, the teacher explained. Malcolm shows similar abilities in spatial reasoning and logical analysis, while Miles demonstrates verbal comprehension and expression at nearly a high school level. Jasmine's throat tightened with emotion. "They've always been quick learners." "This goes beyond quick learning," the psychologist clarified. "We believe all 3 boys would benefit from our exceptional potential program. It would mean additional resources, specialized instruction, and eventual pathways to advanced academic opportunities." "And the cost?" Jasmine asked, always practical. The admissions director smiled. "The school's board has approved full scholarships for all 3 boys. This type of potential is exactly what our endowment is designed to support." Walking out of the meeting, Jasmine blinked back tears. Full scholarships to Dalton, the same school that had educated generations of New York's elite, including several Thompsons over the years. The cosmic irony wasn't lost on her. She found the boys in the library, each absorbed in different activities. Mason was solving a complex math puzzle designed for 5th graders. Malcolm was constructing an intricate structure with architectural blocks. Miles was writing in a journal, his handwriting unusually neat for a 7-year-old. "Mom!" They chorused when they spotted her, identical green eyes lighting up. Those eyes, Michael's eyes, were the only gift he'd given them. Everything else, their confidence, their compassion, their extraordinary minds, had been nurtured in his absence. That evening in their Brooklyn brownstone, purchased last year after their Series B funding round, Jasmine prepared a special dinner to celebrate both the Forbes recognition and the boys' scholarships. The home was modest by wealthy New Yorkers' standards but felt like a palace compared to the tiny apartments of their early years. As she chopped vegetables for a stir-fry, Jasmine's phone rang. The caller ID showed CNBC. "Ms. Williams, this is Patricia Mendez from CNBC's Closing Bell. We'd like to invite you for an in-studio interview next week discussing financial innovation in underserved markets." The invitation to appear on national television, on a premier business program no less, was yet another validation. After confirming the details, Jasmine ended the call and leaned against the kitchen counter, momentarily overwhelmed by how far they'd come. 8 years ago, she'd been counting pennies for baby formula. Now major news networks sought her expert commentary on finance. The next morning, Jasmine sat in a professional makeup chair at CNBC's studios, trying not to fidget as an artist applied television-ready foundation. In the monitor, she could see the anchors discussing market movements, while the Chiron at the bottom teased her upcoming segment, Financial Innovation, How Jasmine Williams is Banking the Unbanked. "We're live in 3 minutes, a producer announced, adjusting Jasmine's microphone. When the red light flashed on the camera, Jasmine channeled the confidence she'd built through countless pitches and presentations. Joining us now is Jasmine Williams, founder and CEO of Williams Innovation, a fintech company revolutionizing how financial services reach traditionally underbanked communities, the anchor introduced. Jasmine, your company has grown from a small Bronx startup to operating in 10 major cities. What's the secret to your success? Jasmine smiled, her voice steady. We built bridges where others saw walls. Traditional banking has historically evaluated communities based on outdated metrics that fail to capture their true economic potential. We created technology that recognizes the value in these neighborhoods and provides financial tools tailored to their specific needs. As the interview continued, Jasmine articulated her vision with clarity and passion. When the segment ended, the producer gave her a thumbs up. That was excellent. We'd love to have you back. Outside the studio, Jasmine checked her messages. Among the congratulatory texts was an email from a premier venture capital firm requesting a meeting. Within weeks, this would lead to a Series B funding round of $50 million, a valuation that would place Williams Innovation among the top financial technology startups in the country. The months that followed brought a whirlwind of growth and recognition. Jasmine's CNBC appearance led to features in Business Insider, Bloomberg, and eventually the cover of Business Week with the headline, "Banking's New Visionary: How Jasmine Williams is Rewriting Financial Inclusion." The cover photo showed Jasmine in a power stance, arms crossed, looking directly at the camera with unwavering confidence. The photographer had captured something beyond her physical appearance, a presence, an energy that communicated resilience and determination. On a crisp autumn evening, Jasmine sat on the living room floor with the boys, helping them with homework while the Business Week cover sat framed on the bookshelf behind them. The triplets, now in second grade at Dalton, were working on projects that reflected their individual interests. Mason calculating the trajectory of theoretical rockets, Malcolm coding a simple game, Miles writing a short story. "Mom, can you check my code?" Malcolm asked, showing her a tablet screen filled with surprisingly sophisticated programming for a 7-year-old. As Jasmine reviewed his work, the television in the background switched to a local business report. The anchor's voice caught her attention. Thompson Real Estate announced today their largest development project to date, a mixed-use complex in downtown Boston. CEO Robert Thompson and his son, Chief Operating Officer Michael Thompson, unveiled the plans at a press conference this morning. Jasmine's head snapped up. There on the screen was Michael, 8 years older but unmistakable. His hair was styled differently, a designer beard now framing his face, but those green eyes, the same ones her sons had inherited, remained unchanged. He stood at a podium, gesturing confidently at architectural renderings while speaking about Thompson's legacy of excellence. For a brief moment, anger flared in her chest, not the raw, consuming rage of years past, but a cooler, more distilled emotion. Michael had simply continued the privileged trajectory he'd been born into, while she had built something entirely new despite every obstacle. The boys, absorbed in their homework, hadn't noticed her reaction or recognized the name. They had never seen a picture of their biological father, never heard his voice. In their world, he simply didn't exist. Later that night, after tucking the boys into bed, Jasmine opened her laptop to find an email with the subject line, "National Financial Innovation Summit, Keynote Speaker Invitation." The message requested her presence as the keynote speaker at the country's most prestigious financial technology conference. Previous keynote slots had been filled by Federal Reserve governors and Fortune 100 CEOs. That they wanted her, a self-taught programmer who had started coding while her triplets slept in donated cribs, spoke volumes about how far she had come. As she prepared for bed, Jasmine caught her reflection in the bathroom mirror. The exhausted young woman who had once stared back at her, dark circles under her eyes and fear in her expression, had been replaced by someone with clear eyes, defined purpose, and an unmistakable aura of success. Brindando with apple juice in crystal glasses in her new apartment, Jasmine couldn't imagine that in just 2 years her company would be valued at nearly $1 billion, nor that fate would place her face to face with Michael Thompson at the most important financial sector event in America. Brindando with apple juice in crystal glasses in her new apartment, Jasmine couldn't imagine that in just 2 years her company would be valued at nearly $1 billion, nor that fate would place her face to face with Michael Thompson at the most important financial sector event in America. 12 years had transformed a desperate single mother into one of the most formidable women in American business. On a brilliant spring morning, Jasmine Williams stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Williams Innovation Tech headquarters in Brooklyn, watching sunlight glint off the Manhattan skyline across the East River. At 34, she carried herself with the quiet confidence that came from building something extraordinary against impossible odds. Behind her, 320 employees worked across an open-concept office filled with natural light. Programmers collaborated on the next generation of financial inclusion tools, customer success specialists consulted with business owners from neighborhoods traditionally ignored by banks, and the executive team prepared for the quarterly board meeting. The energy was palpable, a blend of purpose and innovation that visitors often commented on within minutes of entering the space. "Ms. Williams?" Her executive assistant approached with a tablet. "The photographer from Fortune is here. They'd like to begin the cover shoot in 20 minutes." Jasmine nodded, making a final review of the quarterly presentation. The Fortune magazine cover story had been months in development, a feature titled "The Revolutionizing Force in Financial Inclusion" that would cement her place among the business world's elite. The irony wasn't lost on her. 12 years ago, she'd been counting pennies for baby formula while wearing second-hand clothes. The photo session took place against a backdrop of the Brooklyn office with the Manhattan skyline visible through the windows, a deliberate juxtaposition of the community's Williams innovation served and the financial establishment they were disrupting. The photographer directed Jasmine through several poses, capturing the quiet intensity that had become her trademark. "Perfect," he said finally, reviewing the images. "The magazine's design team will be thrilled." As the crew packed up their equipment, Jasmine's phone rang with a call from her son's school. The triplets, now 11, were flourishing at Dalton School, each developing distinct talents while sharing the same brilliant academic aptitude. "Ms. Williams, this is Headmaster Brennan. Nothing to worry about. I'm calling with some excellent news. Mason has just won the state mathematics competition. He solved a problem that stumped even the high school competitors." Pride swelled in Jasmine's chest. "That's wonderful. Please tell him I'll be there to pick them up this afternoon and we'll celebrate properly." The headmaster continued, "And while I have you, Malcolm's coding project was selected for the Young Innovators Showcase at MIT next month. As for Miles, his short story has been accepted for publication in the National Youth Literary Review, the youngest contributor they've ever featured." After ending the call, Jasmine took a moment to absorb the news. Her sons, once tiny babies in donated cribs while she coded through exhaustion, were now recognized for their exceptional abilities. The genetic brilliance they'd inherited from both parents had been nurtured by opportunities she'd fought to provide. Opportunities that came from building Williams' innovation from nothing. That afternoon, as her driver navigated through Manhattan traffic toward Dalton School, Jasmine reviewed the presentation for tomorrow's meeting with federal officials. The Treasury Department had expressed interest in Williams Innovation's platform as a potential solution for modernizing how government benefits were distributed to underserved communities. "$1 billion contract," her CFO had whispered when the initial inquiry came in. "This would transform everything." At Dalton's imposing entrance, Jasmine stepped from the car in a tailored Burberry trench coat, a far cry from the worn jacket she'd once huddled in on Bronx buses. Students and parents recognized her immediately. Some nudged each other and whispered. Being a celebrity CEO while trying to maintain normalcy for her children was a delicate balance. Mason spotted her first, his face lighting up as he rushed across the courtyard with his brothers close behind. At 11, the triplets were tall for their age, their identical faces showing the first subtle signs of approaching adolescence. "Mom, I solved the Fibonacci sequence problem in under 2 minutes, Mason exclaimed, practically bouncing with excitement. I knew you would, Jasmine replied, embracing him. I'm so proud of all three of you. Back in their Soho penthouse, purchased after the Series C funding round valued Williams' innovation at over $300 million, Jasmine watched her sons scatter to their respective interests. The spacious apartment with its floor-to-ceiling windows and modern furnishings was designed to balance elegance with comfort. Each boy had his own bedroom, a luxury that still sometimes struck Jasmine as miraculous after their early years of shared spaces. Diego is making celebration dinner, she announced, referring to their personal chef, another recent addition to their lives. And I have news too. They want me on the cover of Fortune magazine. The boys reacted with varying degrees of enthusiasm. After years of seeing their mother featured in business publications, another magazine cover wasn't as impressive as it once might have been. Will they mention us? Miles asked, always conscious of narratives and how stories were framed. They might, Jasmine replied. The writer interviewed me about balancing motherhood with building the company. Malcolm looked up from his tablet. Did you tell them about the early days, when we all shared one room? I did, Jasmine said softly. Those days made us who we are. Later that evening, after the boys had gone to bed, Jasmine sat in her home office reviewing the contract proposal from the Treasury Department. The potential was staggering. A federal contract worth $1.2 billion to implement Williams Innovation's platform across multiple assistance programs. It would be the largest contract ever awarded to a Black woman-owned company. Her CFO, Amara, had sent detailed notes on the proposal's financial implications. The valuation of Williams Innovation would likely exceed $750 million if the contract was secured. Investment banks were already circling, sensing the potential for an IPO that could make Jasmine a billionaire. A notification appeared on her screen. The Fortune cover preview had arrived. The image showed Jasmine standing confidently against the Brooklyn skyline, arms crossed, expression determined but approachable. The headline read, "The Financial Revolutionary: How Jasmine Williams is Redefining Banking for America's Forgotten Communities." She saved the image, planning to show the boys in the morning. While they had grown accustomed to seeing their mother in the media, this cover represented something special: recognition at the highest level of business journalism. The following morning, Jasmine met with her executive team to prepare for the Treasury Department presentation. The conference room buzzed with focused energy as they refined their approach. We need to emphasize the security protocols, her chief technology officer noted. Government contracts require significantly higher standards than private sector work. Jasmine nodded, making notes. And we should highlight our track record with community implementation. That's our strongest differentiator from larger competitors. As the meeting concluded, Jasmine paused by the wall displaying the company's major milestones. Forbes 30 Under 30 at 29, the Business Week cover at 32, Entrepreneur of the Year from the Wall Street Journal at 35. Each accolade represented not just professional recognition but personal vindication. The Treasury Department meeting exceeded even their most optimistic projections. The federal officials were impressed not just by the technology, but by Williams Innovation's demonstrated impact in communities similar to those served by government assistance programs. What your team has built addresses precisely the challenges we've been trying to solve, the department's chief innovation officer explained. The combination of user-friendly interfaces and robust back-end security is exactly what we need. As Jasmine and her team prepared to leave, the official added, "We'll need to complete due diligence, of course, but I'm authorized to tell you that Williams Innovation is our preferred partner for this initiative." Back at the office, Jasmine shared the news with her leadership team. Their excitement was tempered by the understanding of what implementing a federal contract of this magnitude would entail. "This will transform the company," Amara observed. "We'll need to double our engineering team at minimum. And navigate an entirely new regulatory landscape," added their legal counsel. Jasmine nodded, absorbing their insights. "It's ironic," she said finally. "We started by helping people who banks wouldn't serve, and now we're being asked to redesign how the government distributes financial assistance nationwide." Amara smiled. Some institutions take longer to recognize value where they're not accustomed to looking for it. That evening, as her driver took her home through Manhattan traffic, Jasmine's phone rang with a call from her assistant. "Ms. Williams, the National Financial Innovation Conference has confirmed your keynote address for next month in Miami. They've sent over the preliminary agenda and speaker list for your approval." "Thank you, Rebecca. Email it through and I'll review it tonight." After dinner with the boys, Jasmine settled in her home office to review the conference materials. The event was the most prestigious gathering in the financial technology sector, attended by CEOs, regulators, and investors from across the globe. Being selected as keynote speaker was yet another indication of how far she had come. Scrolling through the list of participating companies, a name caught her eye: Thompson Real Estate. The familiar surge of emotion, not quite anger anymore but something more complex, rose briefly before subsiding. According to the agenda, Michael Thompson would be speaking on a panel about real estate technology innovation. For a moment, Jasmine considered asking the organizers to ensure their paths wouldn't cross, but the thought vanished as quickly as it had formed. She was no longer the vulnerable young woman he had discarded. She was Jasmine Williams, CEO of a company valued at nearly $750 million, mother to 3 extraordinary boys, and keynote speaker at a conference where he was merely a panelist. The following week brought the official announcement of the Treasury Department's intent to award Williams Innovation the implementation contract. Financial news channels reported on the historic deal, noting both its unprecedented size for a Black woman-owned business and the innovative approach to government service delivery it represented. As Jasmine prepared for a television interview about the contract, she received a notification on her phone. Thompson Real Estate expands digital strategy. Michael Thompson named CEO following father's retirement. The accompanying photo showed Michael at a podium, looking confident in an expensive suit, his father standing proudly beside him. The article detailed how he would lead the family company's adaptation to increasingly digital real estate markets. Jasmine closed the notification without reading further. Their worlds, once intersecting briefly before his cruel rejection, had evolved on separate trajectories. Her journey had been built on innovation and determination, his on inheritance and privilege. Now, 12 years later, those trajectories might cross again at the Miami conference. That evening, as Jasmine helped Miles with a creative writing project, her assistant sent a detailed email about the conference arrangements. One line caught her attention. The Thompson Real Estate team has confirmed their sponsorship of the opening reception. Their CEO will deliver welcoming remarks. A strange sense of inevitability settled over Jasmine. After 12 years of building separate lives, the universe seemed determined to engineer a reunion. She hadn't seen Michael since that snowy night when he'd tossed her pregnancy test onto the marble coffee table like something contaminated. Now she would enter that conference as the keynote speaker, her sons, his biological children, potentially by her side, her company on the verge of a billion-dollar valuation. The narrative symmetry was almost too perfect. As she closed the email, Jasmine felt neither anxiety nor anticipation, only a calm certainty that whatever happened in Miami would finally close a chapter that had been left unfinished 12 years earlier. As she closed the confirmation email for the Miami conference, Jasmine didn't know that fate had marked that event as the setting for a reunion that would shake the foundations of the empire Michael Thompson so arduously tried to preserve. As she closed the confirmation email for the Miami conference, Jasmine didn't know that fate had marked that event as the setting for a reunion that would shake the foundations of the empire Michael Thompson so arduously tried to preserve. The private jet began its descent toward Miami International Airport, cutting through cotton candy clouds as the Florida coastline emerged below. Jasmine gazed out the window, mentally rehearsing key points from her keynote address while the triplets occupied themselves in the luxurious cabin behind her. At 14, Mason, Malcolm, and Miles had insisted on attending the conference, partly to support their mother, but mostly because they'd never been to Miami. "Mom, how much longer?" Miles called out, glancing up from his dog-eared copy of The Art of Rhetoric. 20 minutes to landing," Jasmine replied, turning from the window. "Make sure your tablets are charged. I have back-to-back meetings until 4. The boys nodded in unison, a synchronized movement they'd perfected over years of being identical triplets. Though physically indistinguishable to most people, same height, same angular features, same penetrating green eyes, their personalities had diverged dramatically. Mason, the mathematician, was sketching complex equations in his notebook. Malcolm, the analytical one, was coding something on his laptop. Miles, the wordsmith, had been annotating famous speeches for his debate club. Jasmine studied them with quiet pride. Their brilliance was undeniable, their futures limitless. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every moment of desperation in those early years had been worth it for this. 3 extraordinary young men who carried her resilience in their DNA. The Fontainebleau Miami Beach welcomed them with the deferential efficiency reserved for VIP guests. As they entered the grand lobby, heads turned toward Jasmine, her commanding presence in a tailored Valentino pantsuit drawing attention even in a hotel accustomed to celebrities. "Ms. Williams, welcome," the manager greeted, stepping forward with an outstretched hand. "Your presidential suite is ready, and the conference organizers have sent welcome packages for you and your sons." "Thank you," Jasmine replied, maintaining the warm but professional demeanor that had become her public trademark. "Are the conference registration materials available yet?" "They've been delivered to your suite along with the final schedule for your keynote tomorrow." As they rode the private elevator to the top floor, Malcolm scrolled through the conference app on his phone. "There are some interesting panels, Mom. Technology in commercial real estate at 2 o'clock looks relevant to my project." "You can attend anything that interests you," Jasmine said, "but stay together and keep your security passes visible." The presidential suite stretched before them in cream and aquamarine splendor, floor-to-ceiling windows framing a spectacular ocean view. The triplets immediately claimed the largest guest bedroom, dropping their bags and racing to examine the suite's amenities with the enthusiasm of teenagers experiencing luxury on a scale even they weren't accustomed to. Jasmine moved to the master bedroom where her garment bags had already been unpacked and arranged. Her keynote outfit, a bold red Valentino dress, hung outside the closet, a silent statement of confidence and power. On the desk sat a leather portfolio containing conference materials, including the final printed program. She flipped through it absently, then froze when a familiar name jumped from the page. Opening reception host, Michael Thompson, CEO, Thompson Real Estate. Accompanying the text was a professional headshot, older than she remembered, salt and pepper at the temples, but unmistakably him. Those green eyes, the same ones her sons had inherited, stared back at her from the glossy page. Jasmine closed the program, her heart beating a calm, steady rhythm that belied the complexity of emotions beneath. 12 years of building an empire had given her mastery over her reactions. The wounded 22-year-old who had once cried on a Bronx bus no longer existed. In her place stood a woman who commanded rooms, whose time was valued at thousands of dollars per hour, whose company would soon be valued at $1 billion. Her phone chimed with a message from Rebecca, her personal assistant who had flown down earlier to coordinate logistics. "Executive reception begins in 30 minutes. Car waiting downstairs whenever you're ready." The Miami Beach Convention Center hummed with the energy of 3,000 financial and technology professionals gathered for the industry's premier event. Jasmine's entrance created a subtle ripple through the crowd. Conversations pausing, heads turning, whispers of recognition spreading. Her team flanked her, and the triplets followed, their identical faces drawing curious glances. "Ms. Williams, an honor to meet you," said the conference director, hurrying forward. "Your keynote is the most anticipated session of the entire conference." As they exchanged pleasantries, Jasmine maintained awareness of her surroundings, a habit developed through years of being the only black woman in countless rooms of power. Her gaze swept the reception hall, mentally noting key industry figures until… there he was. Michael Thompson stood across the vast lobby, surrounded by a circle of attentive listeners, gesturing confidently as he spoke. 12 years had added sophistication to his appearance, the designer beard, the perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, the practiced ease of inherited privilege. He looked exactly like what he was, the fifth-generation heir to a real estate empire built on family connections and wealth. For a suspended moment, Jasmine observed him unnoticed, cataloging the minute changes time had wrought. Then, as if sensing her gaze, Michael turned his head. Their eyes met across the crowded space. Michael froze mid-sentence, recognition dawning in stages across his face. First confusion, then disbelief, and finally, as his gaze moved from Jasmine to the three identical teenagers beside her, shock that transformed his entire bearing. Jasmine maintained her composed expression, a skill perfected in countless high-stakes negotiations. She nodded slightly, a minimal acknowledgement of his existence, before turning her attention back to the conference director. "I believe the opening ceremony is starting soon?" she asked, her voice betraying none of the awareness that Michael Thompson was now staring openly at her sons, at the three living embodiments of what he had once called your problem. "Yes, right this way," the director replied, leading their group toward the main hall. "You'll be seated in the front row, of course." As they moved through the crowd, Jasmine felt, rather than saw, Michael attempting to navigate toward them, his progress slowed by well-wishers and colleagues seeking his attention. A professional lifetime of strategic thinking had prepared her for this moment. She leaned toward Rebecca, whispering instructions that her assistant immediately acted upon. "Boys," Rebecca said smoothly, "there's a VIP lounge with refreshments this way. Why don't you get settled there before the opening session?" The triplets, unaware of the unfolding drama, followed Rebecca without question. Jasmine watched them disappear down a side corridor, safely away from Michael's approaching figure. The master of ceremonies tapped the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The National Financial Innovation Conference is about to begin." The timing couldn't have been more perfect. Jasmine allowed herself to be escorted to her reserved seat in the front row, while Michael, now only yards away, was directed to the stage as the opening speaker. Their paths had crossed without collision, but Jasmine knew this was merely the first movement in what promised to be a complex symphony of confrontation. From her prime position, Jasmine watched Michael assume his place at the podium. If his hands trembled slightly as he arranged his notes, only someone looking for signs of disturbance would notice. His voice, when he began speaking, carried the practiced confidence of someone born into power rather than someone who had fought for it. "Welcome to the National Financial Innovation Conference," he began, his gaze darting briefly, involuntarily, to where Jasmine sat. "Thompson Real Estate is proud to sponsor this gathering of the industry's brightest minds." As he continued with prepared remarks about innovation and financial inclusion, Jasmine noted the irony with detached amusement. The man who had once told her she wasn't enough for his world was now speaking about diversity and opportunity, his words ringing hollow against the memory of his cruelty. The opening session concluded with polite applause. As attendees began moving toward breakout rooms, Jasmine remained seated, scrolling through emails on her phone with deliberate focus. She knew Michael would approach. His stunned expression upon seeing the triplets had made that inevitable, and she preferred that confrontation happen on her terms. "Jasmine." She looked up with practiced casualness, as though only mildly surprised to find Michael Thompson standing before her. Up close, the years were more evident on his face. Fine lines around his eyes, a certain hardness to his jaw that hadn't been there at 28. "Michael," she replied, her voice professional, devoid of either warmth or hostility. "It's been a while." He seemed momentarily lost for words, his carefully constructed poise fracturing. "I didn't know you would be here." "I'm the keynote speaker," she replied simply, standing to bring herself to eye level with him. At 5'9" in heels, she matched his height perfectly. "The conference has been promoting it for months." "Yes, of course," he stammered, clearly struggling to reconcile the confident executive before him with the frightened young woman he'd discarded. "Your company has been impressive." Jasmine allowed a slight smile. "Thank you. Congratulations on your appointment as CEO. Family businesses have their own unique challenges, I'm told." The subtle emphasis on family wasn't lost on Michael. His gaze darted around the room. "Those boys with you earlier—" "My sons," Jasmine confirmed, offering nothing more. "They're—" He couldn't finish the sentence. 14 years old, she supplied, watching realization wash over his face. "Brilliant students, exceptional young men." Michael's complexion paled beneath his tan. "They're mine," he stated, not a question but a realization spoken aloud. "Biologically speaking, yes," Jasmine acknowledged, her tone matter of fact. "In every way that matters. Their upbringing, their values, their opportunities, they're entirely mine." Before he could respond, a photographer approached. "Ms. Williams? Could we get a photo for the Wall Street Journal? They're doing a piece on your government contract." Michael's eyes widened. "Government contract?" $1.2 billion, Jasmine replied casually, as though discussing the weather. "The largest ever awarded to a company led by a black woman." She turned toward the photographer, effectively dismissing Michael as she posed for several professional shots. When she turned back, he had regained some composure, though his eyes remained troubled. "Why didn't you ever tell me about them?" he asked, his voice lower now, intended for her ears alone. Jasmine regarded him with a look that made him physically step back. "You said, and I'm quoting, that a black child has no place in my family or business and that I should handle this problem. Well, I handled it. I raised 3 brilliant boys without your name, your money, or your acknowledgement." "Things were different then. I was different," he attempted. "Interesting how regret appears when you realize what you've lost, not what you caused," she observed coolly. Michael's gaze drifted across the room to where the triplets had reappeared, chatting animatedly with a group of young tech enthusiasts. "I want to meet them. I have rights." "Rights?" Jasmine interrupted, her voice now dangerously quiet. "You abandoned your rights along with your responsibilities 15 years ago. They don't need you now. They have full scholarships to any university they choose, trust funds I've established, and a legacy I built from nothing while you managed what you inherited." While observing the 3 adolescents who shared his eyes but carried the Williams name with pride, Michael couldn't imagine that the confrontation coming the next day would not only destroy his professional reputation, but would shake the very foundations of the Thompson dynasty. While observing the 3 adolescents who shared his eyes but carried the Williams name with pride, Michael couldn't imagine that the confrontation coming the next day would not only destroy his professional reputation, but would shake the very foundations of the Thompson dynasty. The second day of the conference dawned with a pristine Miami sky, sunlight glinting off the ocean visible from Jasmine's presidential suite. She stood on the balcony, coffee in hand, watching the waves while mentally preparing for her keynote address. Yesterday's brief encounter with Michael had left her strangely unmoved. The emotional devastation he once caused now seemed like a chapter from someone else's life. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. Miles appeared in pressed slacks and a button-down shirt, already dressed for the day's events. "Mom, Malcolm and Mason are arguing about whether we should attend your keynote or the panel on quantum computing and financial modeling," he reported, rolling his eyes at his brother's typical morning debate. "It's your choice," Jasmine replied, "but I'd love to have you there." "We'll be there," Miles assured her. "I already convinced them. Besides, the quantum computing panel is streaming online afterward." As her sons finished breakfast, Jasmine's phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. Thompson has been asking conference staff about your schedule. Security has been notified. Jasmine frowned slightly. Michael's persistence was predictable yet irritating. She'd known their paths would inevitably cross again, but had hoped he would respect professional boundaries. 2 hours later, Jasmine stood backstage at the convention center's grand ballroom, reviewing her presentation notes one final time. Through the curtain, she could hear the murmur of 2,000 attendees settling into their seats. The triplets sat in the front row, their matching features causing subtle double takes among nearby executives. From her vantage point, she spotted Michael entering through a side door, scanning the crowd before taking a seat in the third row. His presence was expected but still jarring, the physical embodiment of her past watching her command the future. 5 minutes, Ms. Williams, a stage manager announced. When the conference chair introduced her as the visionary founder transforming financial inclusion across America, Jasmine walked onto the stage with measured confidence. The applause was immediate and enthusiastic, the respect of an industry that had once seemed impenetrably closed to someone with her background. "Thank you," she began, her voice clear and commanding. 15 years ago, I was told that certain communities weren't worth banking, that certain people weren't worth investing in. Her eyes briefly, deliberately met Michael's. Today, Williams Innovation serves more than 300,000 businesses in neighborhoods that traditional finance ignored, processing over $4 billion in transactions monthly. For 45 minutes, Jasmine outlined her vision of financial democracy, technology that eliminated barriers rather than reinforcing them. Throughout her presentation, she felt Michael's gaze, heavy with regret and revelation. When she described building her first prototype while caring for infant triplets, his discomfort was visible even from the stage. Innovation doesn't just happen in prestigious zip codes or Ivy League institutions, she concluded. It emerges from necessity, from seeing problems others ignore and having the courage to solve them. Thank you. The standing ovation lasted nearly 2 minutes. As Jasmine navigated through admirers afterward, she kept the triplets within sight, noticing how Michael hovered at the periphery, clearly seeking an opportunity to approach. During the luncheon that followed, Malcolm grew curious about a man who seemed to be watching them. "That guy keeps staring at us," he observed, always the most perceptive of the three. "Do you know him, Mom?" "A business acquaintance," Jasmine replied neutrally. "From a long time ago." Her answer was technically accurate but intentionally vague. She had decided years ago that when the boys turned 18, she would tell them the full truth about their father, allowing them to decide whether they wanted contact. Until then, she would protect them from Michael's sudden interest, which felt more like entitlement than genuine care. The afternoon brought a whirlwind of meetings with potential partners and media interviews about the government contract. By the time the cocktail reception began at 6 o'clock, Jasmine had almost forgotten about Michael, until she entered the grand ballroom and found him standing alone, nursing a scotch and watching the door. "Ms. Williams," he said, stepping forward as she entered with the triplets. "Your keynote was extraordinary." "Thank you," she replied professionally, already scanning for an escape route. Michael's eyes moved to the boys, drinking in their features with undisguised fascination. "Would you introduce me to your sons?" Jasmine hesitated, then made a swift calculation. A brief, controlled introduction would be less disruptive than Michael potentially approaching them himself. "Mason, Malcolm, Miles, this is Michael Thompson, CEO of Thompson Real Estate," she said evenly. "Mr. Thompson, my sons." "It's a pleasure to meet you," Michael said, his voice thick with suppressed emotion. "Your mother's accomplishments are remarkable." "We know," Mason replied with the direct confidence that characterized him. "She built everything from scratch." "While raising us," Malcolm added pointedly. Michael nodded, struggling for words. "What are your interests? What do you enjoy studying?" Before the conversation could develop further, Jasmine spotted Rebecca signaling from across the room. "I'm sorry to cut this short, but I have investors waiting. Boys, The technology showcase is starting in the East Hall." As they moved away, Jasmine felt Michael's gaze following them. The weight of 15 years of absence compressed into a single hungry look. Later that evening, as the reception wound down, Jasmine sent the boys back to the hotel with her security team, remaining to network with key industry partners. She was deep in conversation with the CEO of a major bank when she felt a presence at her elbow. "Jasmine, could we speak privately?" Michael asked, his expression intense. With a polite excuse to her colleague, Jasmine followed Michael to a quieter corner of the ballroom. His composed public persona had slipped, revealing agitation underneath. "They're extraordinary," he said without preamble. "Brilliant, well-spoken, confident. They're clearly exceptional young men." "Yes, they are," Jasmine agreed. "I need to know them," Michael continued, lowering his voice. "They're my sons, too. We share DNA, history." "DNA, yes," Jasmine interrupted coolly. "History? No. History requires presence, Michael. Shared experiences, nighttime feedings and doctor visits, school projects and birthdays. You've had no part in any of that." His jaw tightened. "I made a terrible mistake 15 years ago. I was young, selfish, concerned with appearances." "Concerned with appearances?" Jasmine repeated, her professional mask slipping slightly. "You said a black child had no place in your family or business. You called my pregnancy a problem to handle. Those weren't concerns about appearances, Michael. That was who you were." "People change," he insisted. "Sometimes they do," she acknowledged. "But my responsibility isn't to your redemption arc. It's to 3 boys who have grown up with stability, love, and consistent values." Michael's expression hardened. "I want to know my sons. I have rights." "You keep using that word," Jasmine said, her voice dangerously quiet. "Rights come with responsibilities. You abandoned both 15 years ago." Before he could respond, they were interrupted by a journalist approaching with a recorder. "Ms. Williams, could I get a quick comment about your government contract announcement?" As Jasmine fielded questions about Williams Innovation's federal partnership, Michael retreated, frustration evident in his rigid posture. The following morning, Jasmine awoke to a flurry of text messages from conference attendees. Rumors had spread overnight about Michael being the triplets' father. The story of a young intern abandoned when pregnant, who built a financial empire while raising triplets alone, had ignited like wildfire through the gossipy ecosystem of financial elites. By breakfast, Jasmine noticed subtle shifts in how attendees regarded Michael. Where he had once moved through the conference with the automatic deference accorded to old money and prestigious names, now there were whispers and sidelong glances. The final event of the conference was a panel discussion on ethical leadership where Jasmine was featured alongside other industry pioneers. As the moderator opened the floor for questions, a hand rose from the business press section. "Ms. Williams, there are rumors circulating about your personal history with another conference attendee. Would you care to address them?" The room fell silent. From the corner of her eye, Jasmine could see Michael tense in his seat near the back of the hall. The triplets, seated in the front row, looked confused. Jasmine took a measured breath. She had always known this moment might come, when her private history would collide with her public persona. After years of protecting that narrative, perhaps it was time for the truth to serve a greater purpose. "Thank you for the question," she began, her voice steady. "Since it relates to my journey as a founder, I'll address it directly. Yes, I created Williams Innovation after being abandoned during pregnancy by someone who decided my background and racial identity made me and my children unsuitable for his world." A ripple of murmurs spread through the audience. "I don't share this as a story of victimhood but of transformation," Jasmine continued. "That rejection became the catalyst for building something larger than anything he could have offered. Our company now serves communities traditionally excluded from financial systems, proving that talent exists in every zip code, not just privileged ones." The room erupted in spontaneous applause. In the audience, Michael Thompson sat rigid, feeling hundreds of eyes turning toward him as the pieces connected. "The most valuable lesson I've learned," Jasmine concluded, "is that sometimes people enter our lives to show us exactly who we don't want to be. Their limitations don't define our potential." When the panel ended, Jasmine was surrounded by admirers and supporters. The triplets approached, their expressions a mixture of confusion and dawning understanding. "Mom," Mason asked quietly, "was that about our biological father?" Jasmine nodded. "We'll talk about it properly tonight. You deserve the full story." Across the room, Michael Thompson stood alone, his phone buzzing incessantly. The display showed multiple calls from Thompson Real Estate board members and a text that read, "Emergency board meeting called regarding leadership concerns and company values." That evening, in the privacy of their hotel suite, Jasmine shared the complete story with her sons for the first time. Michael's cruel rejection, her struggle to survive, and the determination that had fueled her success. The boys listened in stunned silence, processing the revelation that their biological father had once deemed them unwanted because of their racial identity. "So he's here now because we're successful?" Malcolm asked, his analytical mind cutting straight to the core. "He's here because he's realized what he lost," Jasmine corrected gently, "but that doesn't create an obligation on your part." "Do we have to meet him?" Miles asked, uncertainty in his voice. "Not until you're ready, if ever," Jasmine assured them. "That choice belongs to you, not to him or even to me." As Jasmine tucked away her son's questions and concerns for the night, she didn't yet know that the story she had shared that day would resonate far beyond the conference walls, reaching boardrooms where the Thompson name had once been untouchable, or that Michael's phone was vibrating with calls that would reshape his carefully constructed reality. While the audience at the gala exploded in applause, Michael Thompson felt all eyes turned toward him. The story of Jasmine Williams, from abandonment to extraordinary triumph, resonated with many present. His phone vibrated, the Thompson Real Estate Board requesting an emergency meeting about leadership issues and corporate values. While the audience at the gala exploded in applause, Michael Thompson felt all eyes turned toward him. The story of Jasmine Williams, from abandonment to extraordinary triumph, resonated with many present. His phone vibrated, the Thompson Real Estate Board requesting an emergency meeting about leadership issues and corporate values. The final day of the conference dawned with a Miami sky painted in watercolor pinks and golds, but Michael barely noticed the beauty as he stood on his hotel balcony, coffee untouched beside him. Throughout the night, emails and texts had flooded his phone, board members expressing grave concerns, major investors requesting clarification of the situation, and worst of all, his father's terse message, "Call me immediately. What the hell is happening down there?" In the presidential suite 10 floors above, Jasmine sat with her sons at breakfast, answering their questions with the careful honesty that had always characterized their relationship. "So all those times you told us he wasn't ready to be a father," Mason said, methodically cutting his pancakes into precise squares. "You were protecting us from knowing he rejected us because we're black?" Jasmine reached across the table, her hand covering her son's. "I wanted you to understand the situation in age-appropriate ways. And yes, part of me wanted to protect you from the ugliness of that rejection." "But you never lied," Malcolm observed, the analytical triplet already processing this new information through his systematic mind. "Everything you told us was technically true." "I believe in truth," Jasmine replied, "but I also believe in timing. You're 14 now. You're old enough to understand the complexities." Miles, always the most emotionally intuitive, asked the question his brothers hadn't yet vocalized. "Do you think he wants to know us now because we're successful? Because we're worth something to him now?" The question hung in the air, uncomfortably accurate in its assessment. Jasmine chose her words carefully. "I think people sometimes realize what they've lost only when they see it thriving without them." In the event hall downstairs, preparations for the final award ceremony were underway. the conference would conclude with the presentation of the Financial Innovation Leader of the Year award, for which Jasmine was the widely rumored recipient. Her keynote address had been the most discussed session of the conference, but now her personal story had eclipsed even her professional achievements in the whispered conversations throughout the venue. Michael entered the nearly empty hall, seeking a moment of quiet to compose himself before facing the industry peers who now looked at him with new eyes. Instead, he found the event coordinator reviewing the stage setup. "Mr. Thompson," she said, her tone noticeably cooler than during their previous interactions. "I wasn't expecting you so early. Just wanted to check the arrangements," he replied lamely, acutely aware of the changed dynamic. Yesterday, he had been Michael Thompson, heir to a real estate dynasty. Today, he was the man who had abandoned Jasmine Williams and their unborn children because of their race. His phone vibrated again, another board member expressing disappointment and concern about brand values. The Thompson Real Estate logo was emblazoned on conference materials throughout the venue, their sponsorship now an ironic backdrop to the unfolding drama. 2 hours later, the award ceremony began. Michael sat near the back, noticing how colleagues who had eagerly sought his attention earlier now found reasons to choose seats elsewhere. On stage, the conference chair spoke glowingly about innovation and leadership before announcing the inevitable. The Financial Innovation Leader of the Year award goes to Jasmine Williams. The room erupted in thunderous applause as Jasmine ascended the steps to the stage, radiant in a deep blue designer dress that contrasted elegantly with her complexion. The triplets, seated in the front row, beamed with pride. "Thank you," she began, her voice steady and clear. "When I started Williams Innovation, it wasn't with the goal of disrupting an industry. It was with the necessity of creating opportunity where others saw only risk." As she continued her acceptance speech, Michael couldn't help but compare the poised, powerful woman on stage with the frightened young intern he had discarded 15 years ago. The transformation was more than success. It was a complete reinvention, a phoenix rising from the ashes of the life he had tried to destroy. "I accept this award on behalf of my team, our clients, and my 3 sons," Jasmine concluded, "who have taught me that our greatest innovations often come from our deepest challenges." The standing ovation lasted nearly a minute. As the ceremony concluded and attendees moved toward the farewell reception, Michael noticed Malcolm, the quietest triplet, standing alone near a display of industry innovations. Without thinking through the consequences, he approached. "That's an interesting exhibit," Michael said, gesturing toward the Financial Inclusion Technology Showcase. "The biometric authentication system could revolutionize access for unbanked populations." Malcolm turned, his green eyes, Michael's eyes, studying him with unnerving intensity. "The processing speed needs improvement for rural implementation, but the concept is sound," he replied with the confidence of someone far beyond his 14 years. "You seem to know a lot about financial technology," Michael offered, his heart racing at this first real conversation with one of his sons. "My brothers and I grew up with it," Malcolm shrugged. "Mom always included us in her work. We've been beta testing Williams systems since we were old enough to use tablets." Michael nodded, struggling for words that wouldn't sound hollow. "Your mother seems incredible," he finally managed. "She is the best," Malcolm responded simply. "Built everything herself while raising us." The unspoken comparison hung in the air between them. Michael hesitated, then asked the question burning inside him. "Did you ever feel like you were missing something? Growing up without a father?" Malcolm considered this with a thoughtfulness unusual for his age. "Why would we? We have our mom, our grandparents, uncles, and a whole bunch of mentors. Our family is perfect just how it is." Before Michael could respond, Jasmine appeared, having noticed the interaction from across the room. Her face remained professionally composed, but her eyes held a warning. "Malcolm, your brothers are looking for you," she said, placing a protective hand on her son's shoulder. As Malcolm walked away, Michael tried once more. "Jasmine, please, They deserve to know who their father is." "They know everything they need to know," she replied evenly. "That he wasn't ready to be a father, and that was the best thing for everyone." "That's not fair," Michael protested, his frustration breaking through. "I can give them my name, an inheritance, connections. They already have a respected name." "Williams," Jasmine cut in, her voice low but firm. "The legacy I've built is worth more than yours. And as for connections, they're the sons of the founder of Williams Innovation. Their doors are already open." The finality in her tone left no room for argument. As she walked away to rejoin her sons, Michael stood alone, the weight of 15 years of absence suddenly unbearable. That evening, unable to face another industry event where he would be the subject of whispers and judgment, Michael drove to Jasmine's hotel. With flowers and expensive gifts for the boys, hastily purchased from the hotel's luxury boutique, he asked the concierge to call up to her suite. To his surprise, she agreed to meet him in the private garden terrace. When she appeared, she had changed from her formal attire into a simple yet elegant white jumpsuit, her natural confidence more intimidating than any power suit. 15 years late and many millions short, she remarked, eyeing the elaborate flower arrangement and gift boxes. "Is this revenge, then?" he asked bitterly. "No, Michael," she responded, her voice calm. "Revenge would have been going after you when you fired me while I was pregnant or when I needed to work 3 jobs to survive. This is simply life. You made your choice, and I made mine." "At least tell them," he pleaded. "Let me know them." Jasmine considered him for a long moment. "When they turn 18, I will tell them the complete truth, and it will be their decision whether they want to know you. Until then, respect the space of the family you decided not to be part of." Her terms were clear and non-negotiable. Michael recognized the same determination that had built a financial empire from nothing, a will that would not bend to his desires now, just as it had refused to break under his rejection years ago. On the final night of the conference, during the farewell gala dinner, whispers about Michael being the father of Jasmine's sons had evolved into open discussion. Executives who had once courted his favor now regarded him with barely concealed disapproval. The story had spread beyond the conference walls, reaching financial news sites and social media. At the center table, Jasmine received the conference's final honor. As she took the stage once more, she decided to address the rumors directly. "Yes, I raised my sons alone after their father decided we weren't suitable for his world," she stated, her voice carrying through the hushed ballroom. "That rejection became the catalyst for building something greater than anything he could have offered. I don't share this as a story of revenge, but of transformation. Some people enter our lives to show us exactly who we don't want to be." The room exploded in applause. Michael, seated at a far table, felt every gaze turned toward him. The story of Jasmine Williams, from abandonment to extraordinary triumph, resonated with many present, particularly women and people of color who had faced their own barriers in the financial industry. His phone vibrated yet again. A message from the Thompson Real Estate Board secretary requesting his immediate availability for an emergency meeting regarding leadership issues and alignment with corporate values. The family dynasty he had inherited, built on old money and older prejudices, was now questioning his position because of the very values it had instilled in him. Weeks later, back in New York, Jasmine received a thick envelope delivered by courier to her Soho penthouse. Inside were legal documents in which Michael formally renounced any claim to paternity, along with a handwritten letter. "You were right. I don't deserve to call them my sons after what I did. I built my life on empty values, while you built an empire on real principles. Thompson Real Estate doesn't compare to what you've created, not just a company, but a family. I understand now that the problem I rejected was actually the greatest opportunity of my life." Jasmine placed the letter in a drawer alongside the pregnancy test that had changed her life 15 years before. Perhaps someday, when the boys were adults, she would share the complete story. For now, She watched from her window as her 3 teenagers did homework at the dining table, bathed in the golden light of the New York sunset. Her empire hadn't been built for revenge, but to prove something to herself, that she was more than enough, that she always had been. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.